Hi again. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast, a weekly woodworking podcast featuring the folk from Woodsmith magazine. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined as always by the regulars, John Doyle and Logan Whitmer. Today's episode 52, 1 year in the making. We started this way back 3 decades ago in 2020, and here we are today. Today's episode, we're going to talk about dust collection, options and suggestions that you have for a big shop, small shop, or no shop. Thanks for listening.
This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Magazine. Woodsmith Magazine has been the trusted source for all your woodworking information for over 40 years. From tips and techniques to furniture projects to shop projects, you'll find it all at Woodsmith Magazine. Subscribe today at woodsmith.com.
So it's been 2 weeks since we filmed one of these. I think everybody kind of realized that our ones last week, Christmas and New Year's, right?
Yep.
That we had pre-recorded those. So it's been 2 weeks since we've recorded this. And in these last couple of weeks, I've had a ton of interaction with people that listen to the show. Listen, either read the magazine, listen to the show, I keep saying listen to the show, watch the TV show, listen to the podcast. And like how it's amazingly fun to get to talk to people that like appreciate what we do. Like I feel like I'm sounding like really nerdy and corny by saying it.
And a little needy.
Yeah.
Well, yes. And then that's not what I'm trying to get at. But
get me.
I think it's so rare to find somebody that appreciates our work. It's like a unicorn. So it's such a breath of fresh air.
No, so there's been a couple people that have reached out to me on Facebook. Brent is building the Craftsman clock that I had a YouTube video on, and he had some questions, so he reached out on Facebook. A gentleman by the name of Matt just reached out today. He's building the miter plane. This little guy from a recent episode of the magazine. He had some questions on. It's a little validating. Like, hey, people actually like what we do and actually are building some of the stuff that we're building, which it's a little validating. I mean, yeah, we see the numbers that, the subscriber numbers, the view numbers, we see all that, but actually being able to talk and, hang out with some of these people a little bit that appreciate what we do is super fun. But my lead-in comes from a piece of equipment I sold from my shop here, last week or this weekend, I think. I had a dust collector hood right over my shoulder, if you guys are watching on YouTube, that was on my table saw. It was a dust collection hood made by PSI. And it's one of those, like you guys know what we have in the shop. We have the saw stop version of the overhead dust collector. It's a dust collector guard combo. That's what this thing is, but it's made by PSI. And quite honestly, I didn't use it a ton. So I listed it on Facebook Marketplace because I had never used it. I installed it when I put my table saw in the shop, my Steel City I had before this one, and I never used it. So I posted on Facebook, and somebody reached out, a gentleman by the name of Mike. And it's funny because we kind of worked out a time for him to come out, and he came. He's like, "Hey, I recognize your house from your sawmilling videos," and I was like, yeah, like somebody else that watches stuff we do. Like, oh god, this makes me feel so much. I don't want to say it makes me feel so much better about doing the stuff we do because we love what we do. I mean, we freaking love it. We have the best job in the world, but it, like I said, it's just a little validating. It's like, hey, people actually appreciate what we do. So Mike, because I know he does listen to the podcast, thank you for coming and picking that up. But that leads me into what I thought would be fun to talk about today is dust collection, because I had that dust collection hood, and I just didn't use it a ton, or I never used it. But looking at it, I'm like, I don't know that I'm actually going to use this. So I want to talk about dust collection, what you guys do in your shop, what are some options, and what you guys think is ideal. Because I have some ideas for my shop that I'll share a little bit later.
Okay.
But I want to see what you guys have what you guys use. So,
well,
Phil, what do you use?
Okay. Well, for those who have seen my shop tour video, what I use for dust collection is I have a fine, I mean, not just fine, but a fine shop vacuum.
Super fine.
F-E-I-N?
Yeah. Dust extractor, I believe is the technical term.
Okay.
Nice.
And that replaced, actually about a year ago, I had a small shop vac brand vacuum in my shop that finally just gave up the ghost. Every time I shut it down, as it spooled down, it would give like this terrible banshee like screech before it finally came to a halt. And I've had my eye on having a nicer dust extractor because they're quieter, for one, and they just do better at collecting dust. And I also like the feature of being able to plug a power tool into the vacuum and have the tool activate the vacuum. We have a couple of fine dust extractors in the shop, and I think a couple of Bosch ones that we use on the TV show set.
And that's kind of what I would like. That would be my designation between a dust extractor and a shop vac, right? Like a dust extractor is meant more to work with the tool, turn on when you turn the tool on.
Yeah. And it's meant as a dust collecting tool rather than a cleanup tool, if that's not too fine of a designation. So I do that for several reasons. A, I have a small shop. B, I'm cheap and don't want to spend a ton of money on a humongous dust collector that's just going to sit around. And since it's just me in the shop and the size that I have, switching hoses isn't that big a deal, because where I have it located, I can have, the bench or the hose is long enough to do something on the bench, or I can just move it over to my bandsaw, which is the other tool that I would use it mostly at. And then if I need to, I'll connect it to my planer. Now, I will say that I have it attached to an Oneida Dust Deputy Cyclone, which I've found to be outstanding as a sidekick for a shop vacuum or dust extractor, because it's a lot easier to empty and doesn't degrade the performance of the extractor, because it's not filling up and the filter's not clogging as quickly and all that kind of stuff. So, and then the planer that I have is the DeWalt 735 that actually has a blower built into it. So I just hook up the hose from the dust deputy to the back of the planer, and I don't even turn on the shop vacuum because the strength of the blower is going fast enough that it activates the Cyclone in the dust deputy, and I get pretty decent collection out of that. Sometimes if I'm planing something thick, there'll be some chips laying around, but that's, a quick pass with the shop vacuum when I'm done with my planing session and I'm ready to go. And then I'll use that same connection at my router table that I have. And a little plug for a couple of videos that we did, that you did, John, on that drill press table that we have in the shop now, and it's one that I have too. I'm going to be honest that when that plan came out and we had a couple of insert plates for that drill press and the fence is designed and the table's designed for dust collection, I'm like, lame, gimmick, doesn't work, because I feel like a drill press and miter saw to me are the two tools that are like, you pick it up when you're done. But after we did those videos and you showed how to make the inserts and then actually use them, and we've used them in a couple of other videos, it's like, holy crap, this really does work. I'm kind of surprised. Yeah.
I was a little surprised too, because it seems like every drill press table dust collection tip we've done is just, like you said, been lame, and it might suck the dust right at the point of the collection, but this one did really well.
Yeah.
So any of our readers that have sent or listeners that have sent dust collection tips in for the drill press, you could send your emails to johndoyle@aimmedia.com.
Yeah. I'm refuting your tips, even though we used them. So, sorry.
Results vary. Results not typical.
Yeah, maybe it was user or builder error on my part. I don't know.
Probably.
But anyway,
I don't think so.
So I want to, one of the things that I want to do is be more intentional about having dust collection, like when I'm using my drill press.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, now that you don't have a table saw anymore or a large router table that went with your table saw,
right.
You really don't need a big dust collector type system.
And even with my table saw, I had that Craftsman saw, I noticed, and I don't know if it's because it was maybe meant for the export market as well, but underneath the table where the blade was half of a shroud, kind of, with threaded holes to create a pocket for better dust collection, and even half of a dust port on there. So I ended up kind of cobbling together the other half of the shroud and then putting a PVC fitting on the back of it to help collect that dust, because otherwise, like on a contractor saw, it's just blowing everywhere. And that did a surprisingly good job with a shop vac. And it was, I don't know if my contrariness came out there, where it was like, I don't need a dust collector, even though everybody else says for a table saw and a planer you need a dust collector. Because I just feel like, well, part of the thing is that I really want people to build stuff and not feel like they need to have this gigantic list of must-have tools before they can start, because like you read some articles and it's like the first tool you should buy is a jointer. It's like, well, what are you going to build with a jointer?
Flatboard.
So I would rather, get a shop vac, connect it to your saw or tools the best you can, and get started. Upgrade as you
most
as you
people,
go.
I think, have a shop vac.
Yeah.
I think most people have some form of shop vacuum, whether it's, a big shop vac, small one, or even a vacuum that they're using to clean up,
right,
sand and whatever. But so, John, what do you have and use in your shop?
Like we've mentioned before, I hadn't used my shop a lot at home before this past spring, because I did so much work here in our shop because we're so well equipped. So I'd say it's more or less not dust collection and more dust redistribution. So it's like the dustier or messier the operation, the closer it gets to my garage door, like the open garage door. And if it's like MDF, it's in the driveway. So it's like trying to just blow it farther away from the garage type thing. So I do have a shop vac, and like Phil said, it's more of a cleanup tool than a dust collection type tool. It's good for cleaning up the chips afterwards, but as far as using it with a sander or tool, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So I think if I'm going to be in there more, it's probably a good time to invest in a better dust extractor type tool, especially for sanding.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it really helps hooking it up to a sander, and doing that with a shop vac is just a huge pain in the butt, because no matter what size of hose you have, it doesn't fit any attachments on any tool ever made.
Yeah.
So
but so over Christmas I upgraded my sander. So I had a couple Bosches, and I upgraded it to a Mirka sander, a used Mirka. It's not pronounced Mirka. It's Mirka. But I started the dining room table. I started sanding, and I actually used. I bought one of these hoses off Amazon. It's like the anti-static one, because if you've ever been sanding something and the static builds up on the hose and it shocks you around waist level, you only do that once. So this is one of those anti-static hoses, and I think it was like $30 on Amazon. It was cheap. It doesn't fit. You speak about it not fitting. It doesn't fit my rigid shop bag very well. So right now I got a bunch of duct tape around it to hold it on.
Universal
this thing
adapter
actually
tape.
worked really well. Exactly. But this actually worked pretty well to plug onto that Mirka sander I have. And I noticed sanding, this does help a lot. Even with just my stupid, dumb 6 or 14-gallon rigid shop vac, it helps a lot. Now, a dust extractor I know would be better. And the cabinet shop that I bought this, Phil, you asked me when I told you I bought that Mirka, you asked if they had one of the extractors. They did not. I think they had Festool ones. But I think, Fine makes them, Mirka makes them, Festool makes them, Bosch makes them, and I'm sure there's probably a few others that make the dust extractors. Yeah. And, God, they would be nice. They're just so dang expensive for what they are. Yeah. I mean, I think the Bosch ones, at least $500. It might be $600 or $700.
Yeah, could be.
And I know the Festool is up there as well. I'll look up the Bosch right now. But I for the longest time in my shop, so the Bosch 9-gallon dust extractor, it looks like best price is $600. So they're pricey. Are they worth it? I think so, because the whole point behind dust collection, I mean, obviously to contain some of the mess, but a lot of it is health related too, right? It's personal safety. And a lot of my resignation on giving up that dust hood that Mike bought from me is that those are designed to pick up that fine dust that floats around in the air, and that's the stuff that's actually harmful. Yeah. It's not the dust that collects in the cabinet, because that stuff is heavy enough. It just falls straight down. Yeah. It's the stuff that stays up in the air and floats around the shop for half an hour after you're done. So that was a lot of my resignation on giving that up. However, I do have all of the saw stops come with the sawed guard that has a dust collection hose port on the back. It's like an 1.5 inch, 1.75 2 inch port, which is perfect size to use with my shop vac. But it also has the 4-inch or 5-inch port on the base of the saw to get the dust out of the cabinet, which the other day I nearly lit on fire. So it was one of those, hey, let's quick vacuum out that cabinet
while it's burning.
So, yes. Well, it was like, there's a lot more smoke coming out of there now than there was 30 seconds ago. I better open that up. So,
give it some oxygen.
I guess So I've never really planned on. Well, I take that back. I had always planned on putting dust collection in my shop. Actually, when I built the shop, I put before I finished the room that my shop's in, I ran 290-degree 4-inch elbows through the ceiling out into the garage, and my end goal was to run a dust collector out in the garage, so it's not in the shop. That way I don't have to, my shop's in my house, so I don't have to drag a bag full of dust through the house to dump it, and just run it off a remote control. We had one in the shop until John sent it through the dust collector, and it doesn't work anymore. But we had remote ones, and they make remote ones, and they work great. So my goal was always to run a hard-lined dust collector through my shop, much like we have in our production shop. So in our production shop, we have do you know the brand on it, Phil? Is it an Oneida? Is it a big Oneida? Yeah, we have a big twin filter Oneida that collects and dumps it into a 55-gallon drum. But we're also running several hundred feet of hard 6-inch line, right, throughout the entire shop. We have 3 saws that each have 2 lines to them. Our 2 bandsaws have lines running to them. Miter saws, sanders. I mean, there's just lines everywhere. But that was my goal, was to do some hard piping in my shop and run it from the corner where it goes into the garage to my table saw, and then to my bandsaw, and then ultimately a joiner planer in here. However, the more I'm thinking about it, and the more that I'm using my shop here at home over this last year, and really getting it set up how I want it, the more I realize that I don't think I need that, at least not in my shop here. Right. Because I'm doing a lot of my heavy milling in the office, and then I'll bring stuff here to work on it. So a lot of my stuff here is, fine cutting, joinery, a lot of that type of stuff, right? So my heavy milling, that creates a lot of shavings, a lot of chips and sawdust. The surfacing is getting done in the shop. So
that's your dust collection strategy, is have another place where you
my dust collection strategy is to not do it in my shop.
Okay.
Just so we're a little clear. On a side note, I did get my butt chewed by Steve a couple of weeks ago because I was milling some
walnut
for my tabletop, and I was very cognizant of it. I kept watching. So we have in the shop, our dust collector drains into a 55-gallon drum, like I said, and we have a proximity sensor on it. So when that drum fills up to about probably half to 3/4 full, the light starts flashing, telling you that it's full. So I am jointing and planing all this stock for this walnut top, and I kept watching that light, and it never turned on. So I'm like, okay, great. Somebody just emptied it. It's probably getting close, but it's the end of the day. It doesn't seem like it's overflowing. Not that big a deal. So I came in Monday morning. Steve's like, hey, did you plane a lot of walnut or something? I was like, yeah, I cleaned up really well. Why? He's like, oh, the dust collector was over full. He's like, both of the filters were full of chips too. And I was like, the light never turned on, Steve. I'm sorry. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, that light's been broke for a couple months. I was like, shoot. Like, I was paying attention. I was watching it. I knew it. But probably should have just sucked it up and emptied it. But, yeah, he said there was a lot of dust in there.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I think my current plan in my shop is to run a wall-mounted dust collector. Okay? So I have had in the past floor-mounted ones, like the rolling ones, like the jet we have in the video studio. I've had those before, and I've sold them just because they're always a pain to move around. I don't usually move them to where I need them. So I think what I'm going to do, I have room, and I'll see if I can spin my camera, maybe. Over there, kind of where my coats are hanging, I have some wall space. So I think what I'm going to do is do one of the wall-mounted dust collectors, which, if anybody hasn't seen those, they basically are just a squirrel cage motor that has a bag that hang off of them. And they hang on the wall. They're great because you can, at least the Rockler one, you can lift up off the, it's basically like a Z-clip that holds on the wall. You can lift it up, move it around, put it on the floor next to your bandsaw or whatever you can move it around fairly easily. Now, I say that until I start thinking about that bag half full of sawdust. That's going to get heavy, and it sounds like it's just going to fall and make a mess. But so I think that's my angle on my dust collection here in my shop, is to do some form of wall-mounted dust collector, and then just do like I don't know how long a hose I can get, but like a 15 or 20 foot flex hose that I can then hook up to my table saw, hook up to my drill press, or my bandsaw, which bandsaw is another one that the dust collection on those usually just sucks, it doesn't suck, and that's the problem. So I think that's kind of my end goal in here. But this is kind of where I'm struggling, is they make those wall-mounted ones that are designed to go on the wall. PowerTech makes one, Rockler makes one, Grizzly makes one. There's a lot of people that make them, and they're all right around that $200 range, $200 to $250. Most of them are touting numbers for cubic feet per minute of about 650 cubic feet per minute. Okay, I've seen and this might make some interesting content, which is another reason why I'm kind of leaning towards it. I've seen people take the Harbor Freight dust collector, which is one of the Harbor Freight kind of gems. What everybody says is the Harbor Freight dust collector is actually really, really good for being a Harbor Freight one. And instead of mounting it onto the rolling base and doing the filter with the bag underneath it, kind of like our jet is, instead they will mount it to the wall. So they'll mount it to the wall. Into that, they will do a dust deputy, a Cyclone, and then they will discharge that into a like a not a 55-gallon drum, but like a 30-gallon drum, a smaller drum. And the exhaust side, Win makes filters that are fairly inexpensive. It's a pleated filter that's about $60 or $70. So you basically take this Harbor Freight El Cheapo $770 dust collector and you soup it up. And the dust collector itself, stock from Harbor Freight says it's a 1,200 cubic foot per minute dust collector. So it's about double the volume as a lot of these other wall-mounted ones. So I'm kind of trying to decide on, do I go that route, and instead of $200 into it, you'll probably end up with $500 or $600 in because I think the Cyclone that fits it is about $200. The filter's another $70, some hoses and all that jazz. But I think I guess, is there ever a point where more air movement is a bad idea?
Probably not.
I don't think there is. Yeah. Until you throw the dust collector remote control through it.
Yeah. Go through twice as fast.
Yeah.
Remote controls, tape measures, any of that. Yeah. It's going to come out in pieces at the other end. And
I've sucked up a lot of crap in my shop vac. You're like, there ain't no way it's going to suck that up and it right up,
And then you wait and then you hear that chunk, 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 chunk.
Yeah. But, and I think there is for people that have larger shops, I think there needs to be a little bit more thought put into dust collection systems, right? Mm-hmm. None of us have large shops by any means. I mean, I'm in a 14 by 20, Phil, you're in a garage, John, you're in a garage. So we don't have huge shops where we have 1,000 square feet that we need to worry about, we have to worry about blast gates and all that jazz to open and close and shut tools. But I think there is, with a larger shop, there's a lot more to take into consideration. And I guess, John, if you were going to tackle, have you looked much into the different types of piping? Because that's another question that always comes up.
Right.
Should I run PVC? Should I run the steel? Should I run the plastic? What's the best?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not something that I've looked too much into, just because everything is kind of pretty local for all my tools and pretty mobile. So it's I don't really need to do all the piping as much, but it's another thing to consider.
I like the idea, I think, of running hard PVC piping. And a lot of what people say is, hey, you have a huge potential there for static electricity, which you do. Again, you get one of those shocks from a shop vac hose. It sucks. You magnify that by 10 times with a big dust collector, then I think you have that potential. So a lot of people will end up running a grounding wire through them. And actually, my elbow coming through the shop, I did pull a grounding wire with it. So I haven't paid much mind to our ducting system in our shop to know if that is grounded. I would assume that's because metal. It's metal and it has that ribbing through,
yeah, I think that's just for strength. I don't know that that's grounding or anything.
Is it? I don't know if there was a molded in grounding rod.
I don't know. I know so little about the specifics of that, but I think the static issues are more for PVC than it is for metal.
Yeah, I would think so as well. And I mean, once it's all assembled, you could ground out anywhere on it and it would be fine if there was a potential. Mm-hmm. But, So I don't know. I guess that was kind of my thought, because I think that's the next move for me in my shop is going to be changing or adding some form of dust collection. Another reason why I had gotten rid of that overhead collector is I can foresee myself in the next couple years buying a fairly good size lathe. I have a little jet back there, but a fairly good size one. I like the Rikon that we have on set. It's fairly large, but it moves and rolls around pretty easily. So in my shop, I think being able to swap out locations, move the table saw out of the way and put the lathe there, I think would be good. And I didn't want that overhead thing hanging there. Was another thing on that. I guess, have you guys ever had any success with dust collection on a bandsaw? Because right now, that's my biggest mess maker in my shop.
The bandsaw that I had before, that Sears one that I have had, that actually had decent dust collection on it, because it had the main port of it was on the, if you're facing the saw, was on the lower left side, which I think is the more optimal place for dust collection. I mean, you can hook, a lot of them have a hookup like right below the table, which can work, but I think you have to have some pretty stout airflow through there to get all of it, just because of the inertia from the blade spinning is carrying a lot of that down and through. So by the time it all those chips sort of lose steam is on that lower left side. And if you can get a collector over there, then it's not as bad. But yeah, I would agree. I think if you can combine those, right below the table setup, even if you have to make some kind of a custom hood for it, and then, in the lower part of the, by the bottom wheel somewhere, is probably the best. Yeah.
So, I mean, we had a reader tip, John. It's probably been 5 issues ago,
probably at least that,
about basically building a shroud to go underneath their table. And I'm sitting here, my bandsaw is right behind my computer, so I'm looking at it right now. There's a lot of room. The dust collection port on the Powermatic is right below the lower blade guide, and you'd probably get quite a bit of airflow through it right there, but there's a lot of room underneath that table for dust to get out before it gets down to that. Yeah. So, we
have that Laguna that's in the Woodsmith shop, and it's an older Laguna, and the newer ones I know are fantastic saws, and I've had my issues with this older one that we have. One thing that I thought was pretty cool about it, though, is right where the lower, below the table dust collector is, on the inside of the cabinet, is this little, slot where you can stick a piece of plywood in, and the blade cuts a curve through that, and it acts like a ramp to kind of channel dust to where the collector is. And that's kind of a genius idea. And for some of the other flaws of that bandsaw, its dust collection actually does pretty well.
Yeah, and to be clear, that is a very old Laguna. I mean, it has to be from early 2000s,
yeah, maybe even longer.
Yeah, it might be older now.
It's a solid 20 years old.
Yeah. And it's funny because, again, I just happen to be sitting here looking at my bandsaw right now. I hate messes in my shop. You couldn't tell by looking at all the crap around me. I am such an anal retentive person that I hate having a mess in my shop. It drives me nuts. It doesn't drive me nuts enough that I clean up after every time I'm done in here.
Which is why you do all your milling at someone else's shop.
That's right. No, it drives me nuts sitting here looking at it. So I guess, and I hate to say this, I'm less concerned for my own safety than I am keeping the mess out of the shop. Especially since a lot of times I will throw on a dust mask if I'm doing something that's like super dusty, like routing. I hate routing. I hate it. And router's another one that can cause a mess. And dust collection on them doesn't always work the greatest. I think the best router table dust collection that I've seen is I love the Infinity router table dust collection. The Infinity router table has the standard dust collection port at the fence, but Infinity also supplies if you buy their higher end table, which is the one we had, they supply a Triton router with it, and it comes with a plastic shroud that goes around the router, and it worked phenomenal. I did, basically a full afternoon full of photos with it, and there was hardly a speck of dust on it, which with it having a black surface doing photography, dust shows up terrible on it, and it was phenomenal. It worked super well. Now I think there's some stuff that you do that you can't get away. I mean, there's some operations you can't use the dust collection port on the fence.
If you're doing grooves or something, or
if you're cutting grooves or, doing dados and parts or whatever. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't work if you're not using the fence. But those two are the biggest. They're the biggest dust makers in my shop. Again, my table saw it just all falls right down in the cabinet for the most part, so not that big a deal. But I will say, as much as I don't know if I can spin this camera to see that or not. So I have that table on the drill press that I have. It's I think it's an old ShopNotes table maybe, or it's okay. And I don't know why I don't know why I feel bad saying this, but God, I love that freaking black table that John built for the Rikon on the video set. I used it the other day, and I'm like, that thing's fantastic. And drill presses are another one that it is hard to collect the dust right there. I did see, it was probably yesterday, I saw some guy on one of the Facebook groups had 3D printed for lack of a better term, it was a donut that had a dust collection port on it. And it basically, he set it around his bit, which, thinking about it now, he'd have to hold it there while he's drilling because there wasn't any holding mechanism, but he said it worked well. Other than that, there's not a good way. A lot of the chips made by a drill press are too large, I think, for anything but the best suction to get a hold of, right? So... I'm not as concerned about collecting dust on the drill press because that's easy enough to sweep up. But my 3 in my shop are the router table, bandsaw, and table saw. And joiner and planer if and when I add one, which I will. I'll probably end up adding a combo unit. We have the Rikon on our video set, and I will say that is one of my favorite jointers ever. Is that Rikon. I'm less than enthused with the dust collection on the planer side of it, just because of how you have to flip the hood around. I find it doesn't collect a lot of stuff. A lot of it escapes on the planer side, where it doesn't on the joiner side. And it could be John and I set it up wrong. We didn't really read the directions.
That's impossible.
I know, right? For anybody that's listening that has a lathe, I always see people saying, "Oh, here's my dust collection set up on the lathe." Eat my butt! You're not collecting anything. You guys have seen that turning room after I'm done roughing out a bowl. There ain't the only dust collection system there is a shovel. And it's funny watching some production turners. Watching either Mike Mahoney or Glenn Lucas, guys that turn bowls for a living and turn platters for a living, they're good enough that they can park Glenn Lucas out in Ireland. He actually parks a dumpster behind him, and as he's turning his bowl, he's directing his ribbons into the dumpster behind him. Come on, that's fantastic. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of dust collection that happens on a lathe. Maybe if you're sanding, and again, that's where a lot of the important stuff is to catch is the sanding. It's not the shavings coming off. You're not, unless you're getting down and snorting lines of sawdust off your lathe bed, I don't think you have to worry about that. But so I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting topic. We don't talk about dust collection a ton, but we use it every day.
Well, you do.
So.
I do.
Well, sometimes.
Do you guys have air cleaners in your shop? Or
I do not.
Yep.
I've thought about it because I know that there's been several times where I've gotten done with woodworking for a session and then turn to go in the house, and I see there's like this light dusting or a cloud and hanging in the air, or a dusting on the two cars behind me. It's like, I guess that'll drive off.
Yeah. I suppose.
Well, and I.
Oh, see, there you go.
There it is.
So mine's up there. Here's the thing with that. I use it when I'm sanding, and I use it when I'm cleaning, because I've told you guys in the past, I'm a blower to clean stuff off. Mm-hmm. And I know it's terrible because it's putting all that in the air, but then I flip that thing on high, and it creates turbulence in my shop. Like all my lights start rocking back and forth because of the wind moving or the air moving and stuff. And it does a really nice job with a cheap $1 filter on it. It picks up a lot.
And that's something that I've considered doing. I don't have a ton of space. Ceilings are kind of low, so it's just a matter of where to put it. I have been kind of interested in, what's that? I don't even know who the company is. Is it Axiom that makes like a floor-mounted air cleaner? Like this, it's round. I think it's called like the Stratus or something like that.
Yep.
And because they have one that looks kind of like a box fan. That's a big filter.
It does. Yep.
So I could see that. We've in the past, Woodsmith did a couple of DIY air cleaners, and I think you can get away with that pretty easily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even like we have a super fan in our video studio. It's just basically two box fans mounted on a rolling cart. If I was working in either one of your guys' shops, I'd have 4 of those for summer because freaking fat guy starts sweating instantly.
You'd be collecting the dust on your sweat.
Yeah.
It's a condensation collector.
Yeah, but then you throw a filter on that, and that will grab a lot of the dust as it's pulling it through. Now, the question I was always asked: do you put it on the intake or the exhaust side? I always put it on the intake side.
That's what I would do, just so it's not blowing the dust into the fan motor and
exactly
right.
But yeah, speaking of just collecting dust on your sweaty arms and stuff, one of you guys needs to come out and spend a summer day milling with me, and then you'll see real dust collection on sweaty arms. And there's nothing worse than getting done milling and you look down and everything's just stuck to you. I've started bringing a towel and a bottle of water and an extra shirt when I'm done. Just excuse me while I strip my shirt off and wipe myself down in your yard.
The number one accessory for a portable bandsaw mill is a pump sprayer with a shower attachment on it.
Exactly. I actually have I'm a huge fan of the Ryobi tools. Like, I love them because I can buy 1,000 batteries and they work for everything.
Right.
But I got one of the tire inflators, and it has a blower on it to do like air mattresses and stuff.
Oh, sure.
I bring that with me, and it takes forever because the hose is, it's an inch hose, but it works. It helps, I guess. Yeah. But yeah.
I will say that.
Let's just leave it on that note. Everybody imagining Logan all sweaty and covered in sawdust.
And they're kind of like,
you should have like a
mouth or something.
Traveling car wash service as well with your bucket and sponge in people's driveways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a complete package.
Yeah. It's funny because talking about dust collection and sawmilling, I do see a lot of times guys that are running sawmills on or stationary sawmills, they'll hook up like swing arms with a hose on them, kind of like a car wash. You know how you go in a car wash and there's the arm that holds the hose above the car, and they will hook up dust collectors to their mill.
Oh, okay.
and run a 5 or 6 inch hose. Most of them just run outside the building, so it blows into the trees, and I'm sure they are going to get sawmill or sawdust drifts out in their side yard. But I just thought that'd be kind of interesting. I thought, because that is one problem with the sawmill, and actually that's probably where, if there's anything that's bad for my lungs that I do woodworking wise, it's sawmilling, because a lot of the times that dust is just blowing right back in your face. And one of the big reasons I actually chose the Norwood mill is because the dust exhaust is opposite side of the operator.
Oh, okay.
A lot of them had the dust port on the same side as the operator, which doesn't make sense to me because you're always walking through sawdust all day then.
Right.
But the Norwood is on the opposite side.
Oh.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword. They do that because a lot of the other companies will do that because then your blade is coming at you, which means your log rests are on the operator side, so you see before you run into them. With the Norwood, their log rests are on the opposite side of the operator, so you don't see them, and then you can cut into them and ask me how I know that. I got one that's really short compared to the other one. But I always try to park so the wind is carrying that sawdust away from me.
Right.
Doesn't always work, though.
Yeah.
So I always thought about my dust collection solution there is going to be a 90-cent J-hook and a 5-gallon bucket, and just hook it on the edge of the mill so it sprays it into the bucket, and I just have to empty it every 5 cuts. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know a better way to deal with that other than maybe putting they make those like debris chutes for construction, like in skyscrapers, they're like a tube basically, and they throw stuff down them. I was wondering if I could get one of those or that type of fabric that I could just hang off the exhaust side so it would just fall to the ground. I don't know if that would work or not. I don't know. Just deal with it. I just need to wear a mask.
Okay.
I have to wear a mask doing everything else. Might as well just wear a mask when I'm sawmilling, right?
That's right.
So the question then for shop vac, dust collector, or whatever, is what do you do with the chips then?
Mulch.
Mine, I go dump in my timber. But and that's and see that's another question that I always see get asked on Facebook groups is, what are you guys doing with your shavings, or what are you doing with your chips, or what are you doing with your dust? Like, everyone's like, oh, let's find a way to reuse it, and that's great, but there's a point you just got to put it in the garbage.
Right. I live in town, so I can put it in the yard waste bin.
That's true.
And it works there. If I know, since most of the time I know what's in it, and if it's hardwood, softwood stuff, I'll put some of it in our compost bin. Yeah. As to, to balance out kitchen scraps and things like that, or basically like landscape mulch in the garden or something to keep like footpaths or something. So, and I've also kept some of it in a bucket because I'll change the oil on our car. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like the way that they set up drain plugs on cars is that, and you got to imagine that the engineers are chuckling to themselves every time they complete the drawings, because it's like the Exxon Valdez every time I change the oil, no matter where I put the little bucket to catch all the oil, or when you go to unscrew the filter and it's running down your arm. And so I keep a little bucket of chips and sawdust that I can use as kind of oil dry for that, and keep it clean that way.
Yeah, I think the main thing, the number one tip for people that have large dust collectors with bags is empty them when they're like 75% full. Don't wait till they're like 110, 150% full.
Right.
It's not going to be an enjoyable experience. Even maybe when they're 50% full. Just get them dumped.
Empty them first.
Yep.
Yeah. No, see, all my sawdust, I go dump in the timber. I actually where my septic in my house drains. So the septic systems just drain clean water out of them. Where that drains is a little like runoff, I don't know, trickle that runs down the hill. So I dump them right there, and it just kind of washes down and helps keep some of that dirt from eroding.
Yeah.
When I'm when I'm turning, like when I'm rough turning bowls, I end up with these gobs of shavings. And since I'm usually doing that at work, I could just throw it in the dumpster. But what I'll do with my rough turn bowls is I'll shove them in a cardboard box with a lot of those wet shavings and kind of pack those wet shavings around them to slow down the drying process. Sure. But when I get home and let them sit for a couple of days or weeks before I pull them out of those wet shavings and put them on the shelf, I'll get those shavings out, and I've actually started mulching around my trees with them.
Okay.
Like the trees that are in my yard, I guess, because I do have a lot of trees. But the trees that I mow around, I've started using those and mulching around them to keep the freaking grass from growing, so I don't have to mow around them. And it works great. It looks nice. I don't have to mow around them. It's awesome.
There you go.
So yeah, I do. If some of the arborists I work with, if they are mulching, so when they take down trees, they have 15-inch mulchers, and they'll just mulch, I mean, almost the whole trunk, right? They'll shove the whole thing in there. And a lot of the farmers around here like the chips,
sure,
because it gets a little bit of natural vegetation back in the soil, but they don't want walnut because the chemicals in walnut will kill a lot of stuff. And I'm all the time telling them, hey, if you guys have walnut mulch, bring it out to my place, because I use it around where I stack lumber, and it keeps a lot of the weeds and grass from growing.
Yeah.
So you basically just end up with a nicely mulched area to stack lumber, and it works really well. Yeah. The one thing I have heard about sawdust, and I'm not going to claim to be a gardener at all, but I've heard that when sawdust breaks down, it absorbs a lot of nitrogen.
Initially,
right?
it will, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
The folk from Garden Gate I've talked to about that on some stuff.
Well, and I've heard you need something to counteract that. And one of the things I heard that will put nitrogen back in the soil is coffee grounds. So I've been actually saving all my coffee grounds from I have a 5-gallon bucket that sits outside my sliding glass door on my deck. And when we're done, I just dump them in there.
Yeah.
So when I start composting again in the spring, I'm going to start mixing some sawdust in with that. See.
And I think that's part of the reason why I mostly just, for sawdust, I'll just compost it because it'll break down first and then helps the whole composting process run optimally.
Sure.
So I've also kept
I know there's a lot of guys.
Plain shavings I'll keep for people that I know that have fireplaces or like a smoker or something like that, where like plain shavings are probably one of the most ideal fire starters on the planet. Like if you can't start a fire with a handful of shavings in just one match,
you're doing something wrong. Yeah. I know there's people that are like, hey, use your sawdust, make fire starters. I can only make so many egg carton fire starters, man. Come on. Like
you start like
you realize how much sawdust we make.
Yeah. Kind of on the no-fly list at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no kidding. Jeez.
Well, see, that's like a new business line for you, though, Logan, because you have the beehives plus the sawdust. You can make these artisanal
fire starters.
Small batch, local fire starters. Beeswax fire starters.
There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so since we've been, 2 weeks since we've talked about, what are you guys working on? What are you making sawdust with in your shop?
Well, I've woken up from my holiday slumber now and back at it. So I think this week I'm trying to get all the readers' tips together for the magazine and dinking around with all that little stuff. And what else? We've talked about, I think next week or the week after, I'm going to start building that revolving workstation, tool station, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So on video, yeah. Phil just built one this past week or something.
Yeah, I was
we've talked
visiting family for Christmas and built the revolving tool station for my father-in-law, who is recently semi-retired, I think is what he is now.
That's how most retired people would
describe themselves.
say
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
So he's been
that's how they describe
getting
themselves.
back into doing more and more woodworking, which is pretty cool. And he was setting up his shop and came across it on Woodsmith plans and asked me about it. And so when we were visiting, I helped him build it, and it's one of our more popular plans. And it's one of those things that looks like a really great idea. The skeptic in me was wondering, like, is it really this nice? Does it really do that well of a job? And it came across to me as being kind of a big space hog at first, but that's because there's really no human scale in the photo that we have with it. Once you build it, that is a sweet, sweet setup for benchtop tools.
Yeah.
It's got a ton of storage built into
so-
it. And and you can basically put 4 benchtop power tools on there and use them whenever you want. No.
Yep.
Yeah, so people that don't know what it is, it's basically a corner cabinet that has a 4-foot Lazy Susan on top.
Yeah.
So you can put a handful of tools on it and just spin them to whatever tool you need. And there's a locking mechanism,
Yep.
right, to lock it in place.
And there's a
So-
drawer under each tool station, so you can put accessories that go with it. And then because of how that's divided up, there's like 2 little pie-shaped cubbies on either side of the station. So there's a, kind of a place to keep your stuff organized as you're working, no matter what tool you're working at. So,
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, like you said, it's always been a really popular project from plans perspective, and it's kind of an older ShopNotes project. It's been around a while, so we thought it'd be fun to build it on video and get it back out
So
there.
is it going to end up in your shop, John?
I don't know. We'll
who
see.
knows where that stuff ends up?
Yeah. So that, and then I think after that we get started on season 15 of the Woodsmith Shop TV show. So right back into it, 2021. So no rest for the weary. But so.
Did you just say you woke up from your slumber? You had 2
Right.
weeks of rest, man.
I know. I need it. So, but the other thing I was going to mention, my wife denies it, but I think Santa Claus listens to our podcast because several episodes ago we were talking about our favorite non-woodworking YouTube
Look
shows,
what you have.
and I got some hot sauces.
Oh,
From-
snap.
Nice.
From Hot Ones. Heatmist.com is their website that they sell their hot sauces, but that showed up underneath my tree, and I was like, I think somebody's been listening to the podcast.
Oh, no.
So, but yeah, it came with a couple hot sauces, and you might appreciate this one. Logan, as a beekeeper, it's like a pepper-infused honey.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had some of those before.
Oh, yeah?
Those are good.
It's got a little sting
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it, but
Unintended.
yeah, I was a little worried when I saw the box. Like I would have gotten something like the XXX, burn your face off or whatever. But it's just like the
toilet paper in the freezer.
Yeah,
one.
go ahead and put the toilet paper in the freezer. So, but it's like the basic. My wife must have thought I was like kind of
Yeah.
weak. Had a weak
you
palate
were.
because I got like
Mid-grade.
the lower end. Yeah, the starter kit.
Awesome.
It's for babies. They put it in baby bottles. So,
That is
I
I thought that was pretty
just
cool.
before Christmas, I started fermenting a batch of hot sauce. Well, I did one batch of hot sauce and then another batch where it was going to be pickled jalapenos and carrots and garlic, kind of peppers and escabeche or whatever they call it. And I don't know if it was because the eczema on my hands had flared up or that I was just handling the peppers a lot more and trying to get a lot of the seeds out. Not all of them, but a lot. That, and I've never had this happen before, but my hands were burning for like 3 hours after that. It was like they were just dipped in acid.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, my wife's had that before where she'll make something and cut something up, and then like we'll be laying in bed later, watch TV or whatever. She'll be like, "Oh my god, my hands are on fire!" And she'll climb out of bed to go like wash her hands in milk.
And I was doing everything. Like we looked it up on the Googles
that.
on what you can do to stop it, and I was trying all of it, and none of it was working. And
like 5-gallon buckets of ice cream, just hands buried, and who knows? So,
well, good for you.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. What have you been working on?
Well, I've actually, which is sometimes weird. I think it's kind of weird for me because, I build a ton of projects for Christmas gifts. And sometimes I get to the end of it and it's like, oh, I just need a break. Or I feel a little burned out or something. But I did pretty well, I guess, on this year for not getting too behind. So.
Well, you started early,
yeah, I
too.
did. And I try to start pretty.
You started in like March.
What else are you going to do during a pandemic?
So
You get to jump on your Christmas gifts.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
But I'm pretty jazzed. I think I was texting with you guys earlier about, I just have a list of some projects that I really want to build, and a couple that are kind of hanging around that I just need to finish. And maybe we need to do that as a podcast topic of like, what keeps you from finishing a project and why?
That'd be a good one.
So I have a couple of cabinets that I want to finish, but then, like I alluded to earlier, I'm making a couple of set of inserts for my drill press table for better dust collection. So that's it's a quickie project, but I want to do that and then jump into some other ones. Most notably, a workbench. How about you, Logan?
So the last couple podcasts I think we did, we filmed them before Christmas, and I said I didn't get the. Did we lose Phil? Okay. You disappeared. Okay. That's all right. So I said I didn't get the table done in time for Christmas. That was a lie. I got it done like the day before Christmas. So yeah, I finished up the dining room table, and I have to tell you guys that this is probably one of the projects that I took my time on. I did everything by the book, except one thing. And I just am so happy with how it turned out. Like, I'll see if I can get some photos if we do it in the show notes page. But I'm so happy with how it turned out. The one thing that I did that I would change, and not necessarily change, it's just I knew it was going to happen. It's one of those, it's going to happen as you're doing it. Because I was trying to get it done so quickly, I sanded it before I let that glue fully dry. So I have a couple raised glue lines. Not the end of the world. I'm the only person that notices them. Not that big a deal. It's just when you don't let the glue sit for a couple days and then you sand immediately, as the moisture evacuates, that glue line you feel a tiny ridge of glue. Not that big a deal. But yeah, my father-in-law helped me carry it up on Christmas Eve. We used it Christmas Day, and it was awesome. I did figure out the finish I was putting on it. I was doing it kind of in the Thomas Mosier spirit, and I did just a hot linseed oil. So I actually ordered some tried and true. So the tried and true linseed oil, and then they have like a linseed oil varnish blend. Well, they call it it's linseed oil and natural pine resin blend. So I did those kind of in the Thomas Mosier style or spirit. And it was, God, it felt so nice. Like it was one of those tables that you just walk by and you just touch it every time you walk by it. And you've done it 1,000 times because it felt so nice. The first hot bowl we put on it left white spots.
Okay.
So it was one of those I kept telling myself, and I was romanticizing it, that it's like, it's going to be character marks, and I don't really care. I don't mind putting a coat of oil on it every couple months. First time, I was like, nope, not going to do that. Like, I had myself so worked up, I was like, yep, not going to do it. So I ended up putting on the top only. So the base is still just linseed oil and that varnish blend, and it looks great. The top, I did do a wipe on of a wiping varnish. So, or a wiping, it was actually the Minwax wiping poly. And it feels nice. It looks great. It doesn't look plasticky, and it hasn't marked at all. So, super pumped. Yeah, super pumped on how it turned out. Speaking of quickie little projects, so about probably 3 years ago when I started at Woodsmith, I did this set of kitchen knives. This was a set from Woodcraft, I think, where they sell the knives, and they're some Damascus Japanese VG10 steel, super nice knives. And it was a set of 5 of them that I bought. And I did 3 of them. I didn't order enough, so I don't know if you guys can see that or not. They're mosaic pins on there. I didn't order enough of the pin stock. So I just did the 3 that I knew we would use all the time. And the other 2 knives have been sitting there, and I ordered the pins like a week later. I just never got back to them. So I decided I would finally glue some more knives up. So these last 2, which is a bread knife, and I don't know what this guy is
it's a
supposed
vegetable
to be,
cleaver.
But yes, vegetable cleaver. That's, of course it is, Phil. But I ordered that, got those glued together, so I'm going to finish those. And I kind of have fallen back off. So I had so much fun, like, talking to people. Every vintage tool I have sold recently were to people that listen to the podcast or the TV show or magazine or whatever. That I've kind of fallen back into old habits, and I've started hitting thrift stores and flea markets again. So I know, don't shake your head at me, Phil. I have a couple things I want to buy. I mentioned that large lathe, so I got to figure out a way to make the money. So I'm starting to buy and sell some tools again.
Can we just put an 800 number up?
Yes, I know, right?
Fundraiser
for
Logan.
But I did, just last night I picked up a beautiful little D8 crosscut saw. Just a beautiful shape. It'll clean up beautifully. So I'm gonna start getting into flipping some more tools again, just to
fund your habit,
cover some of my hobby expenses. Yes. So, but those I like doing that because most of them are quick. I mean, it's like, the kids go to bed. I got 40 minutes to kill before we're gonna sit down and watch a TV show or whatever. So it's like, I can clean up a saw plate.
Perfect.
So, yeah. So it's been a nice, relaxing holiday couple weeks. So yeah.
All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Shop Notes Podcast. We have new episodes drop every Friday. You can check us out at all of your local podcast stores. You can even check us out and see the video version on our YouTube channel and the show notes page at woodsmith.com. We'd love to hear and see what you're building, so please leave us questions, comments, smart remarks, and even photos of the projects that you're working on. You can email us. It's woodsmith@woodsmith.com, or you can comment on the YouTube page. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week for the Shop Notes Podcast. Bye, everybody.
This episode of Shop Notes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Plans. You'll find nearly 1,000 plans covering everything that you'd want to build. From furniture projects to gift projects, kitchen accessories, workshop projects, and jigs and more. Find your next project at woodsmithplans.com.